Welcome back to the Four Podmen, the wrestling podcast we bring you each and every week on the Dynamo Podcast Network. Head over to YouTube, smash that subscribe and bell notification button. Audio versions of the show are available through Anchor, and if you'd like to contact the show, we're on Twitter at @TPodmen. Joining me tonight to continue our review series of the dark side of the ring. I'm sure you can guess by the wrestling buddy who we're going to be talking about. It ain't going to be American made. It's certainly not Hulk Hogan. It's going to be the one, the only, from parts unknown, the Ultimate Warrior. Man, how are we?
We are good. We're suffering a little post PTSD AEW review syndrome from during the week. I've tried to purge everything I can. I've listened to all my Rod Stewart. I've watched all my Rick Rude. I've even been going back to watch some old Transformers cartoons, but I cannot get that shit out of my head, bro.
I listened to the first two albums of The Highwaymen, and it didn't even help.
Ooh, beast. Okay.
Well, man, Dark Side of the Ring, Ultimate Warrior. Where do we begin?
Who?
Described as a righteous gladiator.
Wow. I've heard him described as lots, but Jesus,
That's a new one.
This is how the show opens. There's no messing about on this one. This isn't similar to AEW. This is a slightly different angle. This one comes from two kind of polar shows, if you like.
Interesting, yin and yang, both of them, isn't it? It's like I was saying to you earlier on. We went 20 years in the wilderness, and then we've got every fucking date, day, and time and diary entry of the man from everybody who was around him. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, it's kind
good
of
or
like,
bad.
I looked at both shows, obviously, and obviously you're going to see a review of the A&E one on Dynamo's Dozen that myself and Nate did. Great show.
Which I look forward to, man. Which I look forward to.
But I felt looking at both shows, it was like putting yang and yang together, not yin and yang. And it's kind of like, I just couldn't get it to fit. He was also described, which is kind of weird, and I thought it was, I don't know whether it was good, a colourful, powerful character for a brief moment in time.
Oof. Yeah.
Well, I suppose with that one, it's more like that's just an Eric Bischoff kind of like, you know, he likes to have little poetry and stuff like that. I think that's more so in the sense of how long he spent in the business. I don't think that was actually a knock on the person, I'll be honest with you, because Eric hasn't really like said anything really bad about the Warrior other than that he thought he was mental with his experience with him. Like, you know, when he was talking about what he wanted to do with his characters and stuff like that. And that was Eric's first experience. I'd give Eric a bit of a free pass on that one. I think he means for a brief time in the business. I could be wrong, but that's just...
I think it's just how he felt. I mean, Look, Eric's been in the business a long time. He got in young when he was doing for free the name
But
of
Eric said the same about himself when he introduced himself in one of those shows. I'm Eric Bischoff. I ran a very successful wrestling promotion for a brief period of time. So I think that's just his little. I think that's just his little thing. That's why I'm saying I'd give him a little bit of a free pass.
No, it's most certainly verbose, colourful alliteration. The fella has a bit of diction about him, and
he has a vocabulary.
Yeah, man. Whenever he speaks, it's almost from a neutral perspective. I do enjoy listening to Bischoff.
I like him. So I'm just defending Eric. Yeah. No affiliation to Eric Bischoff whatsoever.
Well, man, you don't need to defend him, man. He's done nothing wrong.
Eric.
Ian, what was your thinking on the dark side in terms of the dynamic of the ex-wife? Kind of when you look at A&E, a lot of more of the focus was this was a story to be told, good and bad, had to be told, but it centered around a man who went on a kind of a journey and came back and refound himself. And kind of ended with that sort of family kind of Hall of Fame, family kind of thing to complete a kind of a story. With this one, I never got the feeling it went kind of that way. It kind of went to a certain point and then it was done.
Well, look, I actually watched it once on my own and then I watched it a second time with the boss. And she watched it as well. And like, this is the first that we've heard about this wife and all that realistically in terms of
Detail.
Yeah. And it was nice to have Rachel watching it with me, because she came at it from a neutral point of view. She was like, well, so there's certain Warrior fans that will be triggered by it, by saying that, yeah, there were some truths that he didn't kind of probably put enough into the in-ring work that he could have, and blah, blah, blah. And at times it might look like she was, but at the end of the day, like, the woman was telling her truths from her perspective. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me was that near the end, you see that she's rooting for him. You know what I mean? And that, like, they had friends, and you could see how upset she got when he said to her in the gym that day, I just want to thank you for being my wife. I just want to thank you for, everything, blah, blah, blah. And like, Rachel kind of pointed it out to me and said, and this is where I got it from, because obviously with us three men, we're very into it. You know what I mean? We're going to be looking for certain things. So to have a neutral there, Rachel was the first one that said to me, I actually think she came across just very honestly. She wasn't trying to bury him, but at the same time, she was trying to tell her truths. She was letting, she was saying that obviously he cheated on her, just
Yeah, she had her
every other
experiences.
wrestler did,
Yeah.
just like every other wrestler did on their wife. So I don't think he should be judged for that, especially in the time frame that we're talking about. The same Sting was the same. He said it himself, and they all did it. And I think she just came across as quite an honest person, to be honest with you. And I saw a lot of people get a bee in their bonnet about it. And I was like, well, look, the woman knew him better than we did. She was married to him. She was there with him from the start. And
what was it, 10 years? What was it
like,
for?
Long.
That's about 8 years longer than most wrestling marriages.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that they had that kind of relationship at the end was something that I thought was quite nice. And, it was quite heart-wrenching a little bit when you hear that, he said that to her, I just want to thank you for being my wife. And the fact that she got emotional during it, I don't think there was any bullshit about the woman personally.
Yeah.
She has a right to her story.
Absolutely.
She came across as well as a very clever woman in terms of she understood where he was trying to get to and what he wanted and what he was driven by. But she also understood the pitfalls of where at times he was going wrong. Like when she discussed about the letter that he wrote, and she was advising him that this is a bad idea, this is not the thing to do. And like staying at home when you should be at the shows and holding up your end of the contract, if you like, was not the thing to be doing. It was bad. So obviously in that sort of brief time where she was around the business, she obviously was exposed to a situation. It's like nearly she picked up on the business nearly better than he did.
Well, she would have, Noel, when you think about it, because the fact that he was Vince's project piece, do you know what I mean? Obviously, when she was around, she probably would have been articulating or maybe getting Vince's articulation clearer in her head than, say, Jim would have been. You know what I mean? Yeah. So and usually behind every great man, there's a great woman. And a lot of times the woman needs to hear something and they can actually, because we're hotheads. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. We know what we know what we want, and that's it. It's happened to me a million times. I'm sure it's happened to you, Jay. I'm sure it's happened to you, Noel. And then
absolutely.
And then they give us that verbal slap in the face or the physical one, and we go, "Oh yeah, you're right. That makes sense now." Because in an alpha male business, in a bravado business that is based on a lie anyway, sometimes the woman picks up the business and the idea clearer because they are basically the clock,
the more level-headed, logical aspect of humanity. No, I agree. I absolutely agree. I think at points I felt like maybe he'd have done a hell of a lot better if she'd have been his manager and not his wife. She seemed to have a head about her, whereas he, let's face it, he was a hothead and he was a fucking looper. This much is clear. But this is also why we love him. This is why his gimmick was unlike any other.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And I think at times, if he'd have listened to her a little bit more, maybe we'd have got a little bit more out of him.
One thing that stood out to me that she did say was that she agreed with the critique that he was getting, that he wasn't putting enough effort into his in-ring work. And she was like, that was true to me. Do you know what I mean? But he didn't care about that. He just thought he can just fast track the way to the top. And it was like going on what Jay said there. It's true. It's like if he had to listen to her and put as much effort into he did into his body and his bodybuilding, we'd have seen a different wrestler almost. You know what I mean? But
I
that's
kind of
why
come
I
in
don't
there and then interject. Forgive me, Ian. I
Yeah.
would say that there was a voice that came in as soon as Hors left his head, which was kind of almost navigating his career through the business to keep him protected and isolated from the rest of the business, to kind of use what he had as a chess piece, if you know what I mean. It's almost like he didn't leave Hor, Vince took him. And there's almost like a chronological timeline where events in the man's life kind of change. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I think so. I think one of the things I got, though, that she clarified for me, which was something that I always kind of had in my own head anyway, and this is just my own personal opinion.
Oh, shoot. Yeah.
Is that it proved for me that he didn't actually love the business. He didn't love the art of professional wrestling. Because, we get to see that as the pressure mounts on him and, the anxiety.
He's seen it with the Schwarzenegger influence. He's seen it as a pathway to something else.
A pathway. And for me, I'm not about pathways. Do you know what I mean? I'm about the bell-to-bell stuff.
The moment.
Yeah. The business.
The business, exactly. Like, you know what I mean? As a skinny fucking kid breaking their bleeding bones, I'm like, why can't this man do it for me? But as a character, as Jay said, 100%, this is why there's such a fine line with the Warrior, and even for me, and I'm only wearing this to tease Jay, in fairness, it's a little inside joke. Anybody watching, they know that this is all inside shit. But the fact of the matter is, I said it on the Dynamo's Dozen episode, the second best entrance only to the Undertaker, but two very, very different ones. You know what I mean? It's the energy and all. Like, Warrior just thought, right, this can be a day job. I'm going to get myself over, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to get rich and famous, because that's what he wanted, rich and famous. And that's kind of one thing that the two shows kind of show you, because I'm the same as you, Noel, watching this from like a neutral perspective, because obviously Jay knows a lot more about the man than we would. So for me, learning more,
I know a lot more now because of these two shows.
Yeah. So for me, watching it from the two shows mixed together, I was like, right, so one is too good and one is too bad. There's somewhere in the middle here. Do you know what I mean? The man is somewhere in the middle here, that there's elements of good, elements of bad. Not everyone's lying saying that he was a piece of shit, but not everyone's lying saying that, all the fans can't be right, that he wasn't always good. Do you know what I mean? Or made good decisions.
Yeah,
human is exactly the word.
Human is the word. We would have got a lot more out of each show if the shows hadn't been competing with each other on Warrior Week. As a fan of the man, and as somebody who wants to learn again the psychology and the trappings of fame, there's no other story like it in pro wrestling. There isn't. It's almost like, Jesus, it's intriguing. I mean, on one hand you have the Ultimate Warrior, the guy we made with this. And on the other hand, you have this super huge behemoth who craves fame, wants attention, is thriving and driving for what we've always been told was the American dream. You got to make it, son. You got to make it. And we see what the pressures of actually making it does to a man who is not prepared to make it. One thing I came out of both of these shows with was an immense respect for men like Ric Flair and Harley Race, who came in from the get-go in the beginning, got their fame through incremental steps, and were allowed to learn how to develop and live with it. He didn't get that. It was like, here's your fame, you're televised international, the Ultimate Warrior, and there was no consideration from the business for him as a human.
Well, the only thing I'll say there, Jay, and my rebuttal to that, and here's where it gets interesting, is I don't have any sympathy on that one, because he was in places where people were trying to educate him, and it was his own undoing that went, no, I'm not listening. I'm going up here. I'm going my own way. I'm getting to the tip.
Usually you'd be right. But
he fast-tracked himself to that level.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Well, the people that were there said it. The people that have worked with him, the promoters, you couldn't do. Bill Watts couldn't wait to get rid of him. Bill Watts, of all people, that was like, I can take this guy. Jerry Lawler, I know you're not a fan. I'm not saying that, but like these guys could have listened.
And I'm waiting for his Dark Side of the Ring episode as well.
Oh no, and Jay, I'm 100% with you. this isn't a knock on the man.
No, not at all, not at all.
I'm
Continue.
trying to just look at it from a standpoint where, like, you know, for someone that was, you know, for a moment in time in the business on a very small scale in Ireland and the UK.
Which he was, yeah.
And for me, you know, like, it's like you want to sit under the learning kind of tree. That's the way my mindset was, and because you love the business, do you know what I mean? Whereas I think his undoing was the fact that he thought he had the body, he had the look, he had the screaming women. We're there already. I don't need to listen to these guys. I'm fast tracking myself on the way. So I think there's a bit of a balance there, and it's a bit of both. I think he was his own worst enemy.
I absolutely agree with you. I'm not disagreeing
saying.
whatsoever. To get to the show, you have to have a drive. Now, like, literally, that line is also rans and those who made it. And the sacrifices you have to make to be at those who made it. That line is the difference between the also rans and those who made it. Look, we've seen those early bodybuilding pictures of the man. He was bigger out of wrestling than we ever seen him on TV. Like,
I know.
Colossal.
Noel, actually, you're a bodybuilding fan, Noel, as well.
Yeah.
You were saying that you were actually really surprised to see them shots, weren't you?
I was, but I think, you know, as you alluded to there, guys, I think as well, because he became McMahon's project, and because he was seen as and we alluded to it, Jay, on the other episode, you'll see it, a bit like Drew McIntyre being the chosen child and having to go away and stuff like that. With this guy as well, because he became the chosen child and the pressure of that and the father situation, and Vince kind of being that father type of role, and the pressure of not wanting to let him down, and the struggle of trying to deliver what he wanted but not what you wanted. It's like it's like if your dad is pressing you into a career that you don't want, but you don't want to talk up and tell him you don't want it because you don't want to let him down because he's invested so much in it.
No, I absolutely believe that.
And I think that's relationship. I think that's where it kind of got fractured. And I actually sometimes think when he wrote the letter saying that he wanted Hogan's terms and stuff like that, I wonder, did he actually want it, or did he knew that it would develop in a way to potentially get out?
Please refuse me. I'm asking for a ludicrous amount of money. I don't want this anymore. Yeah.
I just wonder.
That's a good angle to come from, actually. I never thought
of that.
I'm just wondering, the more I think about it, I'm thinking,
no.
When Vince turned around to him and said, yeah, come to MSG or whatever it was, we'll sort it out and it'll be all good. I wonder, did this guy shit himself and go, this is not what I was looking for. I wanted him to tell me to fuck off, basically. And then when he got there, and then I wonder when he came through the curtain with the chair and Vince handed him the letter and said, fuck off. I wonder, did he go home that week and was it an absolutely decompressive relief going?
You know what? I think, you know what? I think you're onto something there that maybe I couldn't have even fucking thought of, because that is a really good point. The way, because, right, I'll go back to it, all right? And, you know, you look at the Hogans and all, they obviously come up with AWA and stuff like that. So obviously Hogan had been building that brand. Like,
yeah, they've been groomed and tooled for the business at the top.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hogan, like, let's make no mistake about it. Historians know that Vince didn't make Hogan. Hulkamania was pretty much on the way.
Yeah. Anyway. 1983, Rocky III. He had his name. He brought his name to the company.
Exactly. So he was a ready-made guy. And also someone that did genuinely want to be a good wrestler, even though he was just a big behemoth of a thing. So it was different. It's unfair to compare the two guys in that sense. Do you know what I mean? Because they're both coming at it from different mindsets, you know? And I think, so Hogan, obviously, as you said, Jay, to me before, Hogan obviously had built up the mindset of how to deal with this Shark Tank. And I'm going to be the biggest fucking shark in it. You know what I mean? And obviously set that armor around them to go, right, I'm just going to be what I need to be, for better or for worse. And that's not defending Hogan either, but that also goes with a lot of my favorite wrestlers have probably been scumbags at times as well, you know? It's just the way it is. But I think with Warrior, I think the point I made earlier was that he didn't kind of set himself around that early on with Sting, because they were just two little young green boys coming in with a great body, a great look, going from territory to territory, not willing to stay there, not really willing to sit under the learning tree, so to speak. I think Sting probably was a little bit more, and obviously his career tells you that he fell in love with the business. And as Jay said before, he was a natural athlete because he was more of an athlete rather than Jim. Whereas Jim was like, I look like a million dollars.
Power. Yeah, he was power.
He was power. And I think Niall's right. Because to be fair to Vince, in Vince's defense, he did everything he could to put Jim in there with guys that would teach him the WWE way, the WWF way of working. So he was in there with the likes of, obviously, we mentioned it in previous episodes. He was in there with the likes of Rude, in there with the likes of Perfect, in there with good workers, and hoping that we can groom this guy to be able to pull off these matches once he has the belt. Once he had the belt, he had a Shawn Michaels situation where he just, because the mental toll, and this isn't a knock, by the way. Anyone that thinks this is a knock, no. Michaels was the same. Some men just are at a level where they are the star at a certain place. But when you put that big gold on someone's shoulders and they have to carry the company, some run with it and just deal with the pressure, some crack under it. And no one should be good.
Listen,
no one should be judged for that, though.
No. It's the reason the NWA Council chose who they groomed by passing them from territory to territory. How does he deal with 300 days on the road? How does he deal with no family? How does he deal with random fucking injuries and eating out of bleeding, roadkill burger joints? How is he a champ? Because it takes an awful lot of work. You've got to sacrifice a lot of your life to put the company over to make the money that you think you want. There's a level of manipulation in pro wrestling. Like it's a trophy unlike any other in sport.
It's a work within a work, of course it is. You think you're the worker, you're being worked by the boys, but you're being worked from the top as well.
Yeah. Look, listen, every puppet has strings. But he's a funny man, though. I think he was catapulted way too quickly. He seemed more comfortable with the IC strap than he ever did with the big one.
I think a lot of that as well we have to take into account at the timing of the big strap and stuff like that. What he was going through externally.
His divorce.
There was divorce going on and various other stuff going on. And there was self-doubts and anxiety and paranoia and all this stuff. He was riddled with it, you know what I mean? And it was just, they allude to the fact that he, when they started noting down on the reports, the medication, and it just became more and more and more. And
pro wrestlers are the best. Pro wrestlers are the best in the world at putting on a front, because it's the easy go-to is that switch to go back into character.
But see, that's the funny thing about him. The one thing when that the what are you on script screened up, I was aghast at how honest he was. I'm like, there's an innocence to him at times. Most pro wrestlers are, what are you on? 6 Bud Light and the bus whenever I need to go from town to town. That guy just fucking wrote out his prescription. Like, it was unusual. It was.
Yeah, but that was. I think.
Oh, was that what the piss test?
Yeah, but I think a lot of it as well was probably, again, it was maybe the childish naivety in the man in terms of, this is not something that will come back and haunt me. He probably thought this was part of course in the business.
What I mean?
And it was
answer it like a test.
And of course, did it really matter anyway? Because over here I have my stand-in father, and it kind of came back to bite him, that kind of way. And it was, and you boys alluded to Hogan as well. Remember, if you listen to the stories of Hogan in the build-up to WrestleMania 3 with Andre, he's riddled with anxiety and paranoia and everything else as well. And this is Hogan, who's, he's a mega star at this stage, going in against Andre and stuff like that. Hulkamania is at the peak of its powers. Your vitamins, say your prayers.
But he had enough. The difference there, though, is, Niall, is that Hogan had the time to be and again, listen, and this is the, whether you love him or hate him, Hogan has to be commended on that. He took it, all those pressures, and ran with it. He went city to city, went and fulfilled all the obligations, done all the John Cena stuff that we see now, done all of that, and obviously was able to come through because of what we mentioned earlier, his experience in the business. I think Hogan knew deep down that he could get the matches out of the way and do them. You know what I mean? Obviously, the wife said that one thing that stood out to me as well, that he was afraid of fucking up in the match. You know, that he was really nervous.
Well, he
But
knew
she,
I think he knew how raw he was.
yeah, and I think she said that like she was happy when Hogan come up and kind of said, "Look, it's gonna be all right. Like we've got this." You know what I mean? And you can see, and Jay, even though we slag each other with Hogan and Warrior, and people are waiting for the big debate one day, I think you can see that Hogan does take care of him in that match. You know what I mean? They are talking. There's a lot of talking. I went back and watched that actually this week, and obviously they had set a plan out, and Hogan knew what he could do with Warrior, and vice versa. Do you know what I mean? And Vince and Patterson would have obviously been a big part of that too. And it went as smooth as anything could go. Do you know what I mean? But sometimes that anxiety can make you performance like is based on nerves and anxiety, and you know.
Look, the telltale signs are literally in the match. Like, I mean, it's arguably Hogan's biggest moment in front of the North American crowd in the history of his fucking career. I mean, we know he's had a history of squash matches with the big men. He didn't have a great run of opponents when it comes to putting other men over and making other people who will be contenders whenever that belt is dropped.
That's fair, yeah.
Right? And Warrior is with him in the ring, and it's at the very end when Hogan comes in to give him the strap. I think you can see the relief in him. Watch him wrap them arms around the big man. He's like, I can't believe it's over, and now we get to go back in the stone. And it's but there's a different issue with legacy. Like, Warrior is criticized for not being a great wrestler. He is not a great wrestler. He is a cultural fucking, do you know what I mean? He was a changing of the guard. He was new at the time. Fucking heaps of pressure put on him. He had only won that IC belt maybe a year previous. He had only joined the company maybe 3 years before the big one. When you're holding that belt at the end in the dark, what's next? I mean, who has Hogan built up that should be your next challenge? Like, big man, well, look, Bolia had the strap for how many years?
Yeah.
How many contenders did he make in those 5 years?
Well, I wouldn't say that you can really blame that on Hogan, because in
That's
fairness,
not a criticism. I'm just, it's a
because
fact.
I'm thinking in 1990, you know, you've got so much going on here now. This is where you've got the rejuvenation with Jake the Snake, which obviously Warrior had a run in with. This is where you have the entrance of the Undertaker, who's come in, brand new star. So like there was plenty of guys. Like, I mean, you couldn't start feeding them just, you know, yesterday's news in the likes of King Kong Bundy.
No, that's true, but there was no big programs to go in to with him that he was comfortable with. The man was very comfortable in the ring with men who he was comfortable with. The Rudes, the fucking
Oh yeah,
Macho
I know
Man.
what you mean. Well, I mean, I think personally he could have went into more programs with the likes of him. I think, for example, I think Macho for sure. At that time, they probably could have done a run. I know he did stuff with Jake, which I thought was very entertaining. Some of it, to be fair,
It was, but Jake had his issues at the time as well.
He did, of course, and obviously Jake is a big part of this, because this is a time where, and I checked this out because I was thinking that Jake was full of shit, but it was actually verified that Vince was thinking of putting the belt on Jake for a while.
So but Warrior wasn't holding it when Jake spoke.
Oh no, I know
the belt was on Slaughter.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah, that's him talking shit. But
no. Also, I'm going to interject there as well. I'm probably getting ahead of the program, but the video and vignette and interviews they used with Jake was from some years previous. They weren't recent. They weren't.
Yes,
the Jake we see now.
Jake doesn't look that way. He doesn't look that way either. Exactly.
No, and he's a hell of a lot more together now, even if he's still see you next Tuesday.
But I gotta say, Jake, you know, Jake's a storyteller. Like, he is a limerick writer. He could write his own limericks. He's that good with words.
He loves a lie.
He does. But even if it was all a lie, I love the fact that he turned around and goes, "He caught me off guard." And I learned a lot about myself that day. So even if the role of Quarters is a lie, if it was going to be, because we all know the wrestler story, But I'm sure he had something up here that he wanted to say to him. But the fact that the Warrior come up and said that to him and went, he caught me off guard, and I learned something about myself. That was true. You can tell by Jake.
No, I agree, and I think using that footage of him from so long ago did a disservice to the bigger picture. I would have liked them to have gone and found a more recent Jake and like sit down and talk to us.
Well, it's the same with the Undertaker thing. The Undertaker has come out recently with that AEW thing, and there was a certain segment in the Shawn Michaels bit when they were talking about the screw job, and he goes, "Fuck the guy. We got to get rid of the belt." And Undertaker was like, "I didn't say that. I was the one that wanted to fucking kill Michaels and McMahon, and they put that in just to go, fuck the guy, doesn't want to do business."
Yes,
so
we've talked about this before. Sensational manipulation of the story to continue it. Yeah, we do. We do.
But back to the shopkeeper. Where do you want to go next with this? Because it is a hell of a
I'd like to the end. I'd like to focus on the ex-wife, Jay. You might want to take this one up, where she talks about how once he had reached a certain level, Jim Hellwig ceased to exist, and the only thing that existed was Ultimate Warrior. And obviously he spent more time on the road, didn't necessarily want to come home. And then you get the stories about the infidelity and the women, and she finds the day planner, and does a girl in every town, and all this kind of thing.
I believe that.
I don't know how he found the time between the gym sessions. It's look, she has every right to her story as the human who lived beside him for 10 fucking years. Her voice needs to be heard. And anybody who wants to exclude her from the bigger picture needs to realize that adulation of people and the raising of them on plinths when they are just fucking people like us is catastrophic. It kills people. I mean, look, that killed Elvis, and it detrimentally affected fucking Jim. Look, you can massage an ego so much, but sooner or later a change in a human happens. You can be married to somebody for 45 years and wake up beside a stranger over the course of one night. Absolutely. This is what it is to be human. They had 10 years together, and she has every right to what she was saying. And like I said earlier on, he would have probably done a hell of a lot better if she had been his manager and not his wife. But when we balance both of the stories up, right? The AEW aspect of his paternal issue and the father leaving, they created one narrative which was far out of left field and came out of nowhere. And then you got the dark side of the ring, which is, I mean, imagine they were to sit down and put a dark side of the Podmen and they just got all over fucking bullshit from the past and let them sit down and run their mouth. From their side of the truth, what they're saying is true. And from our side of the truth, we could defend ourselves with validity. But the truth doesn't lie in one person when there's two involved. It lies somewhere in the middle.
Yep.
And that's the one thing I wish they had separated these via season. I think we'd have a bigger picture and a better picture if AEW had done it after the dark side had chosen to do them. I think we'd get a more honest reflection of them from one and a more honest reflection of them from the other if they weren't competing with each other to tell better tales.
Well, I think you get the side that he was at the time, that he was difficult to be around and work with from a business standpoint in Dark Side. And then you get the man that obviously eventually kind of, I suppose, had some troubles and learned from them and brought them to his daughters and his kid, to his kids. I don't know.
Well, there was a lot of supposition from the AEW one. There was a lot of hypothetical speculation from people who didn't know him from a psychiatric perspective.
Jay is blaming AEW on this.
Yeah, Jay, you're blaming AEW.
Oh, sorry. A&E. Is that my new hurt locker?
Poor old Tony Khan is sitting there going, I didn't do this.
I didn't know anything. I've banned Hulk Hogan. I'm with you, Jay.
Even though I'm sticking up for poor old Tony on this one. Come on.
Listen.
No, I'm sitting here thinking, was there a third documentary that I haven't watched or what?
Jesus Christ. AEW?
Jay is definitely working with AEW on the slide here, isn't he?
Listen, numbers, letters, and reason muddles my brain, but only whenever I'm drinking, and that happens often. But neither here nor there. Like I said, I think I want every facet and aspect of this man to be told. I want it. I want 5-year-old and 6-year-old me wants this, needs this. Fucking 42-year-old me needs this. We need to stand and look in the mirror and stare at fame via Hogan and WCW and recognize the nightmare we create in people. This shit's our fault.
And the same goes for Hogan too. Yeah, 100%.
It's almost like the Truman Show in a real aspect. My love of pro wrestling has developed way past bell to bell and the turnbuckles. And it's what we do to these men through our adulation and the buying of t-shirts. Take a look at the legacy of belts. Not very many men have coped with having the big strap put on them. There's an intestinal fortitude, to quote Gorilla Monsoon, that creates, makes, and fucking just becomes a champion. And there's very few men I can think of who wore the largest adulation in the world around their waist and walked around with a dignity required of a champ in any sport, in any fucking situation. I can think of, look, Ric Flair might have a lot of wives, but he's still alive to tell the tales. Yeah, didn't he go to make a Lonesome Dove whilst some other fella wore his belt?
Oh yeah, because your man lost his smile, so he said, "I'll give you a year of that." The same what Hogan done with Warrior. He said, "I'll give this guy a year and see what he does with it." And then when the company needs, it's a very similar situation actually.
Yeah, very similar. There's parallels in this shit, and it's interesting, it's intriguing, and it needs to be told.
But
shit needs to be told.
I was sorry, Noel, you go ahead. I was just, the only reason I was making a tease there, but it is very true. You can see the parallels because in the 90s, well, say from 93 upwards to the late 90s, Brett was the guy holding that belt. And like Jay said, with dignity, having fans, having the family values, there was no real bullshit behind the scenes, and holding it and being able to hold it. It was given to Sean, who was the next up and comer. He had his own issues, as we saw in the A&E Sean episode. And there's parallels with both, isn't it? It's like you see Brett and Hogan were able to do it, but much to their detriment, where they get.
Yeah, well, neither of those guys have died.
Yeah,
I mean,
but then
apparently,
but then don't know what I'm
honestly,
saying. Their detriment, it affected
touch wood. I hope that doesn't happen for a long time. That I wasn't wishing that on anybody.
No, I know that. Yeah,
Dark Side of the Ring seems to treat the dead different than it does the living. The Dark Side and A&E, both of those shows seem to have a different tack and take on their subject matter, whether or not they're fucking breathing. I mean, we've seen it with Macho. We had this conversation with the A&E with Macho.
They attack the dead. They do.
And the living get a fucking pass. And I could sling dirt and muck on several of the living A&E biographies, but I'm not going to, because I personally have no interest in the gritty shit. I'm not going to blame a human for being human.
Yeah, well, I suppose the living will take a lawsuit against you and the dead won't. So,
Jerry Lawler, if you're listening.
But I mean, let's bring it back to the documentary, But I mean, the rebuttal letter from Vince McMahon, I believe, was really pivotal in the changing of this man. I think it's a real moment in time where you have a guy here who, for all intents and purposes, is really a child.
Yes.
And is really trapped in that kind of state of never had his dad, dealing with all that stuff that's going on, and then
physically manipulated, emotionally manipulated physically.
And then suddenly he's getting told, you're not Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan is the chosen child. He is the legend. You are never going to be this. You were never going to be this.
You're a legend in your own mind.
Yeah. And you get the line, you're a legend in your own mind. And I can't imagine Warrior at that time when he received that letter. And his whole world must have fell apart and landed at his feet. And I think that's probably where we kind of lose Warrior, and he suddenly becomes Jim Hellwig again.
Can and he starts to question
himself. Yeah, go ahead. Come in now.
Because obviously I have no I don't have a fighter in this dance. Do you know what I mean? This is Jay's thing. That's why I said I'll come on with it. Well, I do with Hogan. Obviously, I'm a Hogan guy, but at the same time, I don't really see that letter as I'm looking at it from a different perspective. It's not like I love Hogan so much that I hate Warrior. Do you know what I mean? I'm just looking at it from a perspective of Warrior chose this battle with the first letter, and this is where it goes back to the wife saying it's not really a good idea. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Vince is obviously getting so frustrated from the bullshit. And it's like, I'm not your dad at the end of the day. I understand. Like, I can't go into work tomorrow and expect my boss to feel the same pain that I feel if my granny is dying. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I suppose it's where I'm coming
I
from.
disagree. I think Vince manipulated it. Forgive me for interjecting.
But it's easy for the Warrior, it seems to be, that it's everyone else's fault. Like, he was a grown man. He was able to make conscious decisions to go and ride women and cheat on his wife all the time. He was able to write them down. He was able to go and get his body to the point that he wanted it to look like he was a smashing machine. He was able to go back to high. No, but hang on, let me finish. He was able to go back to high school and stick it to the people that thought he never could. But then it's everyone else's fault because the Warrior was sad.
No, that's not really where I was coming from. Where I was coming from, if you want to use the analogy, you have a dad who has two sons. He's a big football fan.
Yeah, I understand.
And one of his sons is a really, really good footballer, and the other son plays, but he just gets by.
But the betrayal came from the Warrior because he basically gave the ultimatum to the father.
No, it didn't.
Yes, he held the company up for money.
Yeah, but no, but what I'm talking about is I actually believe now, looking at it, I think the stuff that he asked for, I think he was looking for an out. But I think he wanted the out to
But we don't know that, though.
Yeah, no, but this is my opinion because it's.
He did it 3 times. There's some history behind him asking for an out. He fucks up continually because he trips at the hurdle, the last line. He bottles it. He's bottled it 3 times in his career in the space of what? From 91 to fucking, if you want to include WCW.
98.
Yeah. I don't think he was emotionally mature enough to listen. Forgive me, I keep interrupting.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, I just think when you look at it, it's just. I think what happened is I think he wanted out, but I think he wanted out in a certain way, as if you wanted out, as if you approach your dad and you go, well, listen, I don't really want to be a footballer, but are you going to give me the money to buy these €200 Predator boots? And Vince kind of came back and said, well, this guy over here is the footballer. He's the chosen one. I'm going to buy him the boots, and you're only this. So stop hassling me about the boots. And it was kind of like, it was that kind of way of the rejection. I think if the letter had said, well, look, this is not working out. We think we should part ways.
But I don't know how Vince is the bad guy in this, though.
I'm not saying Vince is the bad guy. I'm saying the effect that it had on Warrior. I'm not
talking about Vince.
Well, that's too bad for Warrior. Then he shouldn't have had a big mouth and tried to articulate a letter to the point of holding the company for money.
Ian, you're talking about a guy who is mentally broken down.
I don't care.
It doesn't matter whether it's his fault.
This is where I lose the lack of caring. Then get out of the fucking business and just retire.
But that's what I think he was trying to do. But I think he.
But then just say it, because he was able to say everything else. I'm sorry, lads. You have me at respect, but this the poor little fella, he just didn't know what.
No, that's not where I'm coming from at all. I think you're missing the point I'm trying to make.
Neither am I.
The point that I'm not trying to defend.
Warrior got what he deserved. The letter was exactly 100% truth from Vince, and the truth hurts sometimes, and that's what happened to Warrior.
And
it's okay to have that opinion.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's a true opinion.
You know what? The truth is a many-layered tapestry. That's your truth from your perspective.
Now. Don't give me poetry, many-layered tapestry. The fact is...
So you want to hear me speak most of the day and now you don't?
Go ahead.
I don't know. Do you have the ability to contain your mouth?
I do, always.
Well, then shut it.
But do you have the ability portray your point without giving me poetry.
You just didn't.
Don't give me poetry. Just say it like it is in layman's terms.
Okay, I'll speak to a level you can understand. Have you ever led men?
Exactly, yeah.
Exactly. Have you ever led men?
No, Jay, have you?
Yes.
Okay.
Many times, in many
Educate
situations.
I've led men, yes, I have. Go on.
Okay.
4 seasons in football I did. Yeah, go ahead.
Were you ever captain?
I was.
And did you ever have a player who was of a certain ability but of a weakened mindset?
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever pick him up off the ground and tell him, stop whinging and bitching, get in there?
Yep.
Now, did you ever have a star player who believed he was so good that he could move on to the next team and was willing to go, but you had to take him and separate him from the rest of the boys who you knew were fucking maulers and brawlers and explain to him, I need you to stay focused. I know you're not enjoying it out there, but you have something that I need and I can make fucking work. Just get back in there.
Because that's a manager's job, but I'd be lying there. No, I didn't have that because
it's not. It is a captain's job on the pitch. The manager's voice ends at the sideline, and on the captain, he leads.
Yeah, I led.
Okay, well, then you can understand, surely.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, if I was in a locker room with a Warrior, I'd be same as the boys.
He never got to share a locker room with anybody else. The minute he got to that company, he was groomed and pushed to the fucking stars. He was treated like the prodigal son. He was told he was everything and massaged, and his ego was rubbed. They knew they were going to make money off him. Vince seen something that...
Again, we're going back to it's Vince's fault.
Yes.
So his attitude towards certain people, which have a right to have an opinion on the Warrior, his attitude, it doesn't matter. They're wrong because it was Vince's fault. So how he treated certain people.
I'm not telling other people that their opinions are wrong because they're not mine. What I'm saying is my perspective is this. My perspective is he was catapulted through the territories because nobody wanted to work with him because he was unwilling to work with anybody. But he had a situation that didn't work in dark territories in front of crowds where locker rooms full of fucking men who've been at the business a long time. Mm-hmm. Along comes a guy. He steamrolls through all the fucking territories, buys half of them, understands where the business is going, buys everybody up who he can, and squeezes out everybody who he can't. Takes one look at Hulk and realizes Hulk has got to a threshold where he's going to go somewhere else sooner or later. Somebody else is going to pay him more money than I can pay him. I need to replace him quick. He's always scanning for the next big thing. Always. In walks Helwig, who's still very much Helwig. Most other champs would have walked into the ring and done the shake hands shit and sat down and laced up their boots with the fucking baby faces if they were one side, heels that they were if they were the other. Vince didn't let him do that. Took one look at him and said, I see fucking cash in you, son.
Hang on. Vince didn't tell him that he wasn't allowed to converse with the other boys. That is complete and utter bullshit. Complete and utter bullshit.
What was the distance?
They traveled.
One.
He
We're not psychologically
my kid and the Bulldogs.
Yeah, no, look, he was friends with some of them.
He traveled with the Bulldogs. If Vince wanted to protect them, the last two people he would have had the Warrior traveling with in a car was the Bulldogs. So that just that's null and void.
I think the interesting conundrum there as well is when you see the reenactment, and we don't know how true it is, of course, but the reenactment of the conversational meeting that he had with Jake. And Jake goes to McMahon, obviously, and McMahon says, go talk to Warrior about it. And he goes to talk to Warrior, and Warrior says, it's going to be my way. I'm going to make lots of money. You're going to do what I tell you. Now get the fuck out of my locker room. And it was kind of like, so you see that kind of, there's an element there. I don't think that's all McMahon. I think it's a kind of
No. There's definitely an ego. There is definitely an ego. There is definitely an ego at play.
Yeah.
But did he not do the same thing to Triple H?
But he also years later, like that apology video that you see at the start, that was for a reason, because what happened?
Yeah, look.
Like we can't keep skirting over the cracks. Like
I'm not scared over the cracks. The guy was
Not you. I'm just saying.
No. It is me. It's a one-on-one conversation. The guy was seriously flawed as a human. That is without question. As far as a professional wrestler goes, out of a scale of 1 to 10, he's grazing 1. When you give him somebody who can work with him and that he likes, he can fucking give you exactly what you need for
His
pay-per-view
opponents were
and
10 and
television
he was
ratings.
1. Yeah.
Well, listen, that's the story of pro wrestling. You can't dance by yourself. You can't wrestle a broom. You can't wrestle a fucking sex doll. But he did. He developed in the ring over a period of time, simply because he was handed to and trusted with good workers. The old narrative that he came in green and he left green is just not true. From a physiological, from watching the guy. Physiological, that's the one. I don't even know that's the word.
I think it's fair to say, though, in terms of wrestling, where we know it's a business of collaboration, he kind of missed that point, didn't he?
He didn't. I think his personality traits were, look, we live in a world now where you can analyze, and we have a bigger understanding of the many different aspects of personality. Do you know what I mean? We understand things like bipolar and on days and off days and ADHD and many different aspects of humanity. It's more than just you're either sound or a fucking dickhead.
Yeah.
I think he was of a certain set. If he took to you and liked you, you were the best to him.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of men he just took a shine off. Like a lot of men who he didn't like. Now, he did come around in the end, and an awful lot of that was ego. And this is why his story is so fascinating. All of it is coming out now because all of what happened in the television era. Yeah. Men who were like him were weaned out of the business in the dark days, the 60s and 70s. Men like him who were physical phenomenons, who had this enigmatic charisma, if they couldn't work, if they couldn't go 35 minutes for Harley twice on a Sunday, they were weaned out of the business. Yeah. But Vince took the business in a new direction. Do you know what I mean?
What was your feeling then? I mean, the documentary obviously moves on to, like, he's moved away from the business. Obviously we know he's, that childlike character comes through. He's quite impressionable. He was impressed, like, by Vince. And now he's moving into another scene where this conservative speaking is coming in. We get all the stuff with the colleges and the speeches and
the controversial shit.
The racism and the homophobia and all the other stuff that comes through. Apart from the documentary, I mean, obviously, as Warrior fans, we seen this coming through, and this was kind of like a wake-up call to say that this guy is being impressed on again, but in a very different direction.
Yeah.
And again, it shows the fragility of his character and personality. What was your thinking with that kind of stuff?
My thinking is, if I was to narrow down in a very simple way who and what he was an empty vessel with serious structure who became whatever filled him, whether it was Vince, whether it was her, his new wife. I think he was a very fragile man, but a very strong man. Like when he had a focus, nothing could get in his way. But who was his focus dictated the direction, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And to watch in even the A&E doc is last wife absolutely fucking him under the bus for shit she more than likely filled him with. Like, I mean, he would have been happy with his gym, being Jim in his gym, fucking training people, but that failed simply because, like I said, an empty vessel with no direction is no person.
Yeah. And there was
what I mean?
There was still that craving. I mean, obviously when you've gone from the heights of WrestleMania 6 and all the different comebacks that came with it and stuff like that and all. And
an identity crisis as well.
Yeah, and then trying to figure out, and then the next thing you're thrust into this conservative speaking world.
Oh Jesus, that was ugly. Yeah, no, look, I remember
Came at
watching.
the right time.
You did, yeah. I remember watching that particular. You remember the footage they showed from the "Queer and Don't Make the World" Torn speech?
Yeah.
I watched a whole lot of that back in the would have been the early days of the YouTube and shit like that, and it was ugly watching.
You
He
actually
was,
watched that with me one night, Jay. I remember that.
yeah.
We were somewhere, I don't know where it was, but I remember you showing me that, and we were like,
Yeah.
oh. I was like, I don't think he realizes what he's actually doing here. Like,
A man with no degree who was all fucking beef walked into a room full of college graduates and went on his ultra fucking conservative rant, and he was just slaughtered.
and it's a different kind of conservative back then, especially as what we have now. Like, because obviously the lines have been blurred in terms of, you know, what's left and right now is different. You know what I mean? There's certain elements, but at that particular time, conservative was conservative. You know what I mean?
I'm not even going to pretend to understand politics. Everything he fucking said was wrong. Everything. He wasn't a cerebrally intelligent man. He was a fucking idiot. Bless him. I love him. He did get there in the end. He smartened up towards the end of his life. But post-identity crisis in WWE, he was a lost sheep. He'd run out of fucking golden tickets. He had been on the top of the world. And then he was down here. And
It kind of was a self-destruction of parts, wasn't it? In parts, like when
no, it was an absolute and complete self-destruction. Like I said earlier on.
And I mean this with love, by the way. I'm not speaking of the dead. I'm not saying
no. When we psychoanalyze the past, we do it to make the future better.
Yeah.
Bless him, he was a fool. And bless him, he wasn't a great wrestler. But for his point in time, there was nothing like him. But when the lights are off and the paychecks stop, you know, he was as lost as anyone.
Yeah.
I'm not making excuses for him. He had no self-worth or self-identity, and he had no way of projecting himself on his own. Whatever he listened to, that's the way he went.
Gonna credit, because in fairness, it's always good if you hear stuff on YouTube as well. This is a little tip for anyone doing YouTube videos, and you hear something on YouTube, make sure you always credit the creators of this if you're going to use their content. So I'm going to credit Hannibal TV here on this, who's been on Dynamo's Dozen in the past. Great show as well. Check him out. Hopefully we'll get him on again soon. But he done a shoot interview recently with what's his name, Shane Douglas. And Shane Douglas was asked about the whole Warrior thing, and Shane Douglas said he could recollect a situation when he was first in, like first, and that was like 1990. And he said it was in the build up to WrestleMania. And he said Hogan, he goes, whatever people think that Hogan and Macho didn't get along, he goes, they got along back then. Like they were like that. You know what I mean? But he said Hogan and Macho were like the two key components. They were drinking at the bar with all the boys. The bar was kind of locked away just for the wrestlers. And Hogan gets a call from like one of the bellboys comes over and says, "You've got a phone call up here." And Hogan's like, "Oh, give me a minute." And he said Hogan's gone for about 20 minutes and comes back and goes, "Look, I got to go up and help Warrior here." Apparently, he was anxious about whatever way he took his steroids or whatever it was, and he was anxious about the matches. So Warrior, actually, it shows you the dynamic there that Warrior confided in Hogan to help him, because he was obviously looking at him as the guy, like you're the guy. And Hogan was kind of like, for fuck's sakes. But he said Macho started making a bit of a joke then, going, "I wish the fucker would just come down." You know what I mean? Like so it shows you that segregation. And then Hogan comes down and goes, "Yeah, I just got to go and fucking babysit now." You know, now Shane said he thought like, "Oh, well, that's a bit mean." You know what I mean? But at the same time, that's the way these boys were bred on. You know what I mean? And it shows you that the Warrior was just such high anxiety in the build up to that. And this is Shane Douglas saying that I don't see what he would have to gain. It could be bollocks, could be a lie, but it came out of his mouth. And
Well,
as I
you know
said,
what? It correlates
go and
with
check it
everything we
out
know
on
now.
Adam
No,
TV anyway. I just want to disclose that. So
it correlates with everything we know now. Again, the certain personality sets that are more fragile than others, and there's times when you shouldn't push them too hard. I mean, we've seen stars of many media crack under the pressure, but those other stars usually have other divisions or leagues or careers to go into. Professional wrestlers, what's out there for them after professional wrestling is done?
oh, you do crack. I mean, I've always been one of those people that like I like pressure, regardless of what it was, whether it was football, whether it was. For me personally, I don't know what it is. I hate it at the time, but when it happens, it's like, right, you do or die. Do you know what I mean? But like you say, it's not everybody is the same. Not everybody is.
No. Your mindset is how you approach things. You see that? Look, I don't care if there's 5 people or 600 people in front of a room. If I'm pressing play on other people's music, DJing, that's me at the start of the night.
I was going to give
every
you that
single
one day.
time.
I was going to
Every
give you
time.
that example.
Still to this day.
I was going to give you that example. I remember the first time when I had to step out of the world of pro wrestling and then get into the world of music. I remember shitting. I was like, it's one thing being in a room with your 4 friends and practicing this shit. But then when you get in front of people, whether it's 10 people, whether it's 100 people, whether it's 1,000 people, it doesn't matter. There's a point where when your nerves are so bad in the human body that you shit yourself, you know, and you keep going. And you either do or you don't. But nobody knows how they perform under pressure until the lights are on. And the thing about the Warrior is he was able to perform, but I think the problem with the Warrior is that he didn't like it.
No, he didn't enjoy the pressure.
But yet he had put himself into that position.
I think,
and then kind of like went, shit, I've worked myself into a shoot here. You know what I mean? Like, I have to do something. I mean, I am the Warrior.
Yeah, I'm at the apex of this stage in this industry. Where do I go? What do I do?
Yeah. And like, I mean, I went back after we spoke last week, and I don't know whether you've done this, Niall, but it's worth doing. I went back and on the network and tried to watch the Warriors run after he won the belt. Like, it really wasn't pretty. Like I mean, it was pretty in the sense that he looked great. He changed the hair and all, and he fucking had the mullet and everything, and like he looked phenomenal. But good, like, again, to be a star in your field, you gotta have the fundamentals, and that's the one part that I think that he went wrong in his early days, is that he didn't care about the fundamentals.
The other side of that.
It's not even that. I mean, he never viewed this as being his field.
Hence why it's very hard.
No, he was a bodybuilder.
A professional wrestling fan to have respect for him, you know?
Well, you have to have a certain level of respect.
No, but I mean, no, respect
Give me one second, I have to whiz again.
Respect for what he did, you know, in his time that he was in there. But it's very hard to have respect for the inevitable failure, if that's what makes sense. And I'm only speaking.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it depends on the kind of wrestling fan you are as well. I mean,
like, if you're a Jim Cornette, can you see why he would hate an Ultimate Warrior? Yeah.
Yeah, but you can also see why certain people might hate Jim Cornette. You know what I mean? Well, so it's, you know what I mean? So it's back and forth, really.
It just seems like the Warrior gets a pass ahead of legends that have actually achieved things within the business over a long period of time.
I don't know whether it's a case that he gets a pass.
It is, though.
But I don't know whether it is, because people, if you're a wrestling fan and you know, and you love Bret Hart, and like we talk about Rick Rude, Bret Hart, Mr.
Well, I don't think Bret Hart or Rick Rude's name should really be in the same sentence.
No, but what I'm saying is, if these are the people we continually reference and talk about on shows when we talk about wrestling and stuff like that, and obviously he's not in that conversation. He's in a different conversation. He's in a conversation.
But we're willing to. Certain people are willing to diss Hogan and call him not a good human being, and call him this and call him that. And for all we know, Hogan, I mean, nobody had sympathy for Hogan going through his divorce, or no one had sympathy for Hogan going through what he was going through. And yet the parallels here are ridiculous. People called Hogan a racist, yet the Warrior said certain things about black people, and it was like, poor Warrior. Like
I don't think it was. I don't think it was poor Warrior. I think it's a case.
No,
of
but
like,
we're doing a whole show on like why he's just misunderstood. And
like, I don't think we give anyone a pass in terms of homophobia or racism.
No,
like that.
absolutely
You know what I mean?
not.
I think fundamentally all that stuff is totally wrong, incorrect,
Absolutely.
out of touch, and
that's nothing to do with politically incorrect. It's just an incorrect opinion. Yeah.
What I always say to people, and you know, I reiterate this on podcasts all the time. Jay can back me up on this as well. I don't like judging a person's life on a moment in time. I like judging a person's life in a more totality way of looking at it. And how you turn 100%. Things around, and you know how you understand where you've went wrong and how you make amends for it. And this is as much for Hogan as it is for Warrior when you think about it. And you have to, you know, you have to look at it from that point of view. Look, every one of us are flawed in a certain way. It's the nature of the beast and human race. We've all done things in our life that at times we look back and go, you know, I could have handled that a bit better. I could have done that a bit better. I shouldn't have gone down this road. I should have done this, that, the other, whatever it is. We all have issues in our past and stuff like that. But I think that's not the way to judge us. You know what I mean? I think the way to judge the situation
agree with that.
Is to look, and the documentaries are very good in that way, where they look at the whole story, and especially the way his daughters on A&E allude to the fact that there's a story to be told, some good, some bad. He was our father. He was flawed. There was issues, but he came back around full circle. He became that father. In some respects, Jay, I alluded to it on another podcast with Ian, that he stopped being Ultimate Warrior and became Jim Hellwig again. And it was like it went full circle.
Not again. For the first time in his life. And again, I'm gonna combine a few little fucking.
I know what Jay means by that. Actually, I'm with Jay on that. There, actually, I think exactly for the first time in his life, he became Jim Hellwig. I would agree with that.
Yeah, like I mean, I don't. After watching about, Jesus, man, I've been in so many arguments over my fandom this last while. We can't stop thinking, and with this man, since the triumphant return and demise, there was a stoic silence about him again. It was like the first time when there was nothing. For 15 fucking years, it was nothing. Then we got his Hall of Fame induction, H bringing him back into the fold. The greatest Hall of Fame speech I believe there's ever been, and the fact that he led out by Linda and pointed down to the two little girls. Everything was for you. This is what Daddy used to be. And then there was 5 years of solemn, all of the men coming out of the work and starting to say nice things about him. I never heard anybody say anything nice about him, but all these men, all these journeymen, whether it be the Brawler or Greg Valentine, they all had something nice and constructive to say. We never got that before. We just got post-destruction DVD shit. But this week, I
think your fans are agreeing with you there, Jay, in the background.
Well, that's my ladies. I'm going to have to let them in sooner or later. They're going to start biting. But I haven't wrestled with fandom like this. Again, my Warrior love was me trapping what I love about this business into a little pocket and keeping a little childish innocence to myself. But listening to Cornette speak about him recently, watching the A&E, sorry, not AEW, A&E.
Only can you get a pass?
Well, no, you get 2 passes, 1 for banning Hogan for life and 2 for not being A&E.
Hey, don't start going Hogan now. I'm being nice.
and then the dark side of the ring. Look, again, it brings into touch the fragility of fame, and when we raise people who are human just like us to a pedestal far beyond where any human should have to survive. Some are made for us, some aren't, but inherently there hasn't been a human born to date that was not flawed in some way. And 6-year-old me wrestling with 42-year-old me and looking at it, I'm like, we know who he was. We know a lot about it. Now I understand a little bit more why the dark years were so fucking dark.
Why don't we get a pass for Hogan on that one then?
Because we haven't psychoanalyzed him post-mortem yet.
No, but no, and I'm asking that generally because I'd love to see one of these dark sides on him too. Do you know what I mean?
You won't see what you would. Look, there's certain men who are untouchable. The Warrior's life now. I'm not even. It's not even a comparison. I've said many good things about Hogan in the past on podcasts. I understand, I recognize and realize his value to the business, the sport, whatever it is. My anger with Hogan and my issue with Hogan is if he had a little bit more warrior in him, a little bit more innocence, and a little bit more pro wrestling right now would be the biggest picture in the world. But the fragmentation and manipulation of men at the top flight at different points in times by different men means we're left in a situation where there's 3 WWE shows and 1 in the AEW show and all of these little other bullshits. It should be the greatest sport in the business. It should be prime time all the time. But that's neither here nor there. That's a different discussion. Wrestling with who the Warrior is and who I know he is now and who I loved so hard as a child, you know, fame is a fickle drug, and we have to be very careful who we place it on because there is good people out there. Like, you know, the only person I can think of who deserves his accolades and fame, and we haven't heard any shit of, is John Cena. Everything else was just a prototype run up to him.
Chinese don't agree with you.
Yeah, but Taiwan is there in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I don't think we can add any more.
I don't even remember what I said. I was very emotional.
I'll send you a link. Dynamo Podcast Network.
It's on YouTube, Jay.
I'm going to close it out, though, by saying that I do think, listen, you know, 100% seeing the end for me was a great thing. I love a success story. I really do. And especially when it's someone that is a part of my childhood and someone that, you know, I bought toys of, you know what I mean? I absolutely loved it. And I hope that like people have that same kind of view on other people when it starts coming out that they were suffering in the background that we didn't know about. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, I mean, the redemption for the Warrior was literally the last 72 hours of his life.
All televised.
All televised. And, you know, regardless of whether people think, you know, certain, you know, even with the Hogan Warrior thing, even with that, that's something that's on camera that is still the last words that they said to each other. And people can surmise whether it was meant or it wasn't meant or blah, blah, blah. But the fact is, that's what they were. And it meant something to Warrior. And I'm sure it meant something to Hogan deep down as well. And I think when you put all of that into, you know, a melting pot, good Lord, what a way for the man to go, even though it was way too soon, but what a way for the man to go. And all I could say, like I said on Dynamo's Dozen, is rest in peace, Ultimate Warrior. And you've left a hell of a legacy behind you. And you've also left a hell of a pair of kids behind you because they seem to be doing really cool too. And I'll always have a little Warrior in me too. So there you go.
Yeah, I think the way to end it is what Jim Ross said. It's a script that you could not write.
No.
So all we've left to say is rest in peace, Ultimate Warrior. As always, Dynamo Podcast Network for the shows. Head over to YouTube, smash the subscribe bell notification button, Anchor for audio versions of the show. And obviously, if you want to hit us up, drop your comments in the video, or you can hit us up on Twitter @TPodmen. Gents, a pleasure as always.